Now, how many times has your phone rung today only for you to hear a voice telling you about the thousands of pounds you could claim from missold PPI? Citizens Advice is calling for a ban on cold calling by claims management companies after a survey showed 9 out of 10 people have been contacted over the past year. Gillian Guy is Chief Executive of the Citizens Advice Bureau.
The way in which the companies sell their services is aimed at being to people in the most vulnerable situations. So it's really pestering through text messages, through phone calls when you're sitting down, I don't know, watching the television, getting you at that moment. And then actually, instead of saying you might have a claim, pretending that you do actually have a claim, they even quantify it sometimes. And that is really seriously attractive to people who might be struggling with their household bills.
Well, Mary was cold called by a company offering to claim back PPI on her behalf.
I got, pestered me all the time. My phone would ring, and finally I gave in to them. They charged me £138.83, and the thing is, I didn't look at the contract part where it says they charge you 39 pence for what they do. I didn't check that because there were so many phones that I just, signed her off thinking I was going to get that big amount back, because I was already in debt with the bank.
So how do these companies get away with disturbing our evenings, and what can you do to stop them? John Mitchison heads up the telephone preference service. Hello, John.
Hello there, how are you?
Hi, fine, yeah. And David Freedman's here, Managing Director of Confero Limited, a company that does cold calling for a range of clients. Hello, David.
Hi there, Tony.
David, what kind of work do you do?
Well, we're a contact centre, so we work across a range of services. One of those areas is financial services, so the whole sort of PPI area does fall under that. It's not an area that we do any work in, and that's a decision that we took on an ethical basis, that it's not something that we would take part in.
But what take up do you get on cold calls, David?
Well, I think there is a way that one has to look at cold calling. It's an effective method of communicating, and it should only be used in areas where you're looking at quite highly profiled individuals who have opted in to receive calls about a certain product or a certain service. We do calling to on behalf of our clients.
I understand what you're saying, David, but nevertheless, even if you can say they've opted in, it's often when you've forgotten to tick a box, isn't it? When you're booking a hotel room or you're doing something else as well. How do your staff cope with the general annoyance they must meet when they cold call people?
There is people do sometimes get upset at being disturbed at home, but if you are targeting a highly profiled group with a relevant message, generally, actually, we find that people aren't too upset. In fact, to a certain extent, they're probably almost relieved some of the time that it's not another PPI call or an accident advice call. And so we try and be very gentle on our calls. We say to our clients that there's no point trying to badger a customer or prospective customer into taking something and buying something that they simply don't want. Not that many years ago, the Indian call centres, for example, who were also running tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of calls a month through for things like mobile phones, were banned by all the mobile phone networks from cold calling and selling mobiles over the phone.
So David, you're convinced that it works and that people don't get fed up of your calls. Let's just speak to Paul, because we could have plucked anyone really, because we've had a lot of people contacting us, David, saying they are annoyed by cold calling. Paul's online from Cleckheaton in West Yorkshire. Hello, Paul.
Hi, Tony.
Hiya, what's your experience?
Right, it's a really bad one. I've just listened to what John has to say there, but I get something like 4 or 5 cold calls a day on my home number. It's so bad, I don't even bother to answer the phone anymore until my answer phone kicks in and I can hear who the caller is. Often it's PPI, surveys, random products. My answer phone message now says, if you are a sales call, hang up the phone now. Friends and family, please leave a message. That's how bad it's got, Tony.
David, what do you say to Paul?
I understand, and I completely empathise. And unfortunately, it's these sorts of PPI calls, etc., that have actually tainted the market completely. Paul, I would say that it's probably something where you're doing the right thing, and certainly, Confero work within the DMA and regulated by the Direct Marketing Association, and the TPS is one of the areas that the Direct Marketing Association, I believe, govern. Is that the right word for that, John?
So, well, I'll bring John in a second, David. I've just got one more question for you. Do you sleep well at night? Because while you may say people want, don't mind getting a call, they've actually opted in. You must just know from anecdotal evidence that many thousands of people are disturbed by these calls, and in some cases, when they're living on their own and they're elderly, they're more than disturbed. They may be frightened.
Yes, and we absolutely encourage anyone, if they don't want to receive these calls, to register with telephone preference service, etc. The problem is that if you're calling from offshore, companies flout these regulations. They're outside of the regulations, or they believe they're outside of the regulations, and so it's the consumers, like Paul, are taking evasive action. We certainly are urging, and we work with the Information Commissioner, DMA, to encourage the stamping out of these road calls to allow people to receive messages that they're actually interested in.
Okay, Paul, are you still there?
Yeah, Tony, can I just say something to that? Because basically, John's answered the problem. It's overseas companies that are now the rogue problem in all of this. I'm ex-directory, for God's sake.
All right.
That means I shouldn't be getting these calls.
Well, let's get some practical.
Means nothing.
Let's get some practical help for you, Paul. It's actually David who's been talking. I'm now going to bring in John Mitchison, who's from the telephone. It's all right, telephone preference service. John, Paul's on the line. Explain to him what he can do. Is there anything practical he can do?
Yeah, I mean, the telephone preference service is a free service for consumers, whereby if you register your number, it's a legal requirement for anybody making outbound sales and marketing calls to screen their lists against that database of numbers so that they don't contact anybody who doesn't want to be called. One of the things that David mentioned was overseas call centres, and a lot of people think that if the call is coming from overseas, there's really nothing they can do about it. But in a way, that's a bit of a red herring, because if a company in the UK is either instigating the call or benefiting from the call, then they still have to comply with that legislation.
All right.
Right. Okay, that'll be some help anyway.
All right. Well, look, Paul, thanks for your call. John and David, thank you for taking part. Keep your texts coming. We've had a lot of texts on this subject.